Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be sharing what I know about getting into grad school programs in clinical psychology. I went through this process myself just 2 years ago, and I was lucky enough to get into a doctoral program, so here is what I know. A little bit about me first. I applied for the 2023 fall cycle, so I applied in 2022. I applied to 5 programs, 4 of which were doctoral programs, 2 PsyD programs, and 2 PhD programs, as well as 1 MA program. Of those 5 programs, I was interviewed for the 4 doctoral programs and was accepted into 3 of those 4 programs, as well as a master's program. As some of you might know, these programs are partially funded, not fully funded, so take this for what it's worth. Now, a little bit about me. I've done 2 bachelor's degrees. My first one was in computer engineering, and my second was in psychology. My psychology GPA was 3.93. I got pretty decent GRE scores, 163 verbal, 166 quant, and I'll talk about that more later. I had 2 years of research experience over 2 labs, 2 years of clinical experience at Active Listening Hotline. I had 1 publication, of which I was 6th author, and 4 presentations, of which 1 was first author. I had 3 reference letters, 1 really strong, 1 relevant, and 1 pretty strong. Now, the biggest piece of advice I think everyone should know is that you should choose a program that suits your interests and goals and strengths. So yeah, first of all, identify what you're interested in, what you're good at, what you have experience in, and also where do you want to go. So for example, I really enjoy psychodynamic thinking, and that really limits my program choices already. Second of all, I was also hoping to be in the New York City area, and luckily those two kind of go hand in hand. So I sort of had my programs picked out quite easily. That said, one big resource I found was this Insider's Guide to Graduate Program by Norcross and Sayet. You can find PDF versions online, but you can also buy it off Amazon. In it, they detail all the APA accredited programs, both PsyD and PhD, and they give you a little bit of a breakdown of a guideline of what you want to choose. One thing that I found really helpful was that they broke down the clinical versus research orientation by percentage. So they'll say something like 60-40 clinical research. I found that really helpful. To note, the programs I applied to were all pretty clinically focused, and the program that I'm in now is, I would say, 65-35, maybe 70-30, clinically oriented. Now, I have 6 points to talk about, first of which is research experience. So what you really, really want and what they really care about is relevant research experience. And of course, this applies to programs that care about research. The more you care about research, the more it matters. And at the end of the day, it's all about finding the right fit, not only for you, but for the PI. So you really want relevant research experience. Of course, that's not always doable. So from there, somewhat relevant research experience or any research experience will do. For me, I had somewhat relevant research experience. I sort of crafted a narrative that went from just, unrelated research experience to somewhat related to something that was close to being relevant. And I sort of, my path has been that I've been moving towards the research that I do actually want to study, which is on the therapeutic alliance. So I hope that helps. Top tip here, it's crucial to try to craft a narrative of your journey into research, how you went from perhaps irrelevant research experience to something that's more relevant. Second of all, clinical experience. This is also very important. Some options are crisis or active listening hotlines, hospitals, all sorts of support groups, community of all sorts. You could try shelters or retirement homes. It depends on the program, but if you're applying for a PsyD program, it will matter more. If you're applying to a research-oriented PhD program, it might not matter at all. So, depending on which program you apply for. That said, I would say in general, I feel like this is a little less important than research experience for most programs. But again, it depends on the program that you're applying for. Third thing, grades. I can only speak to my program and programs that I know that others have gotten into. The more, typically, the more research-oriented and fully funded programs have higher bars for GPAs. I know people ranging from 3.2s to 4.0s who've gotten into programs, and of course, the higher the better, typically. That said, it's not all that matters. This is just one of the many things they look at. So if you don't have the greatest GPA, you still have a chance. That said, if you're early in your undergrad journey and thinking about grad school, I think it really pays off to try to get those A's starting from the beginning. I was kind of neurotic about it. Having it been my second undergrad, I was able to really focus and concentrate, and I knew this was what I was going to do, so I was able to get a higher GPA than I expected. And that really helped in my applications. So that's all I could say. Okay, moving on to the fourth thing, GREs, which are often optional now, I believe. In my year, it was optional for some programs and mandatory for others, so I took it. My biggest advice here is obviously only submit this if it's mandatory and your scores are high. If your scores are mediocre, then there's no need to submit it if it's not required. You can kind of look at it as like a sort of bonus to bolster your application a little bit, just in case that it is not mandatory and that you have good scores anyway, and maybe it could make up for a low GPA or another factor. As for resources, one thing I found really, really helpful was all the practice GRE tests that are available. As well, there are many third-party services out there that provide a lot of test bank questions, and those are especially helpful for the quant section. So basically, I just did hundreds of questions over a month for quant and was able to get the hang of things that I had forgotten from mostly high school, laws with like exponents and things like that. As for the verbal section, it's basically a vocabulary test, as well a bit of like a comprehension test as well. So I would suggest drilling vocabulary apps or lists or books, whatever is to your liking. I found vocabulary apps in particular to be really helpful, and just finding the GRE practice comprehension questions as well, just to get a hang of how they typically ask questions. And there I was able to boost my verbal score from like the first practice test. I think I got like 150 to my real test, which was 163. And I think that's like a percentile jump from like below 50 to 90. So I was pretty happy with that. Quant, I think it improved my score by like from 160 to 166 or so. But yeah, whatever you're weak at, just focus on that. Fifth point is the personal statement. This can be really important, especially if you have a narrative that might be a little different. So my biggest advice that I got from others was to show and not tell. So just present your story as it is and allow the reader to decide for themselves and judge. So you don't want to be saying like, you know, I worked so hard, blah, blah, blah. Rather, it should be more like, I did X, Y, Z, and therefore the reader will comprehend and judge that, oh, wow, this is a really hardworking person. Another really important part is not to overshare. I think this is quite typical for the field that we're in. You know, even if your story does relate to mental health or clinical psychology in a way, present it in a way that's professional and easily palatable. Try not to provoke feelings of pity or someone needs to feel sorry for you, because application committees are reading, you know, hundreds of these. And while your story is a worthy story, this is typically not the time to share it. This is coming from someone who does cater towards the emotional side of things more often than not. So I had to also learn how to tone it back and really just present my story as it was, and be direct to the point and not really dilly-dally too much. I'd say if you're not a strong writer, definitely spend lots and lots of time on this. If you are a strong writer, you could probably hammer it out in a day or two. Personally, I spent 4-5 months on mine. I started in the summer, my first drafts, and I got several supervisors and friends to read it, which really helped, and I learned these points along the way, so hopefully this helps. Finally, the last point is reference letters. So what you do want are really good recommendations where you have personally worked with a PI or a doctoral student, and obviously typically the more relevant or the higher up the position, the better. So if somebody is well known, not only that, if they are somebody that your potential PI knows personally, then that could really help your application, because they are just an email away from asking what they think of you. Moreover, this is, again, all about fit, right? So personally, I had one very relevant recommendation letter that most PIs knew of, which really helped despite me not directly working with him. I worked with his grad students. My second reference letter was also from a research lab, and this was where I worked really closely with a doctoral student and did a lot of tasks and had a publication and a first author presentation as well. And this was a really helpful recommendation letter because it was so strong and personal. He wrote it in such a way that it really showed and reflected that he knew me. And finally, I had a third recommendation letter from a prof. This one, I'd say, was the weakest of the three. It just showed that I was a decent enough student for graduate studies. So that wraps up this video. I hope this was helpful. If you got any questions, let me know down in the comments. Good luck on your applications. It's a tedious process. Most people don't get in the first year. It takes multiple tries. And if it's right, then it's right for you, you know? There's no need to stress too much. Just let things be. So good luck.